Welcome to Closing the Growth Gap for May 21st, 2024. I'm Ben Scanlon, co-founder of Mosaic Growth Solutions, and Closing the Growth Gap is where I share my insights on the most interesting articles related to growth and marketing based on my experience assessing hundreds of B2B SaaS companies and helping drive millions in growth. We have a number of great topics today that will help your company close the growth gap. First up, Tom Morton looks at the Gartner CMO survey and has some interesting takeaways. Marketing budgets are declining. Investments in digital and technology are not as effective as was anticipated. And so he asked the question, is it time to move that budget from digital to customer experience? So interesting insights there. Then Adam Holmgren of GetAccept says they rolled out an interactive demo and he was surprised at how effective the results were. 9 out of 10 completed the interactive demo, and 30% of those became ICP book deals. So interesting conversation there. And then finally, Mike Taylor, who's a prompt engineer, shows us how we can use AI to do more than just write terrible blog posts. He has a 5-step process he follows, and going through this process really produces some amazing results through AI. So you'll definitely want to stay tuned there to try to figure out how you can help drive growth for your company through AI. All right, let's get started.
Okay, let's take a look at this post from Tom Morton. If you want to understand why the world of marketing and brand building feels odd today, the new Gartner CMO study is a good place to start. It confirms what many brand owners and practitioners are feeling. Marketing gets a smaller piece of the business budget than before. 2024 marketing budgets account for 7.7% of company revenue. It was 10.5 to 11% in the years before the pandemic. Now, this isn't surprising. In fact, I think this is necessary. You see how expensive it's getting to acquire new customers, and the charts are just going up and to the right in a way that's just not sustainable. So I'm not surprised to see it coming down. I think it's a good thing. But as Tom shares, maybe it's time to think about a new strategy in terms of driving growth. The proportion of marketing budget spent on internal talent and agency fees at its lowest point for at least 7 years. That's why so many talented professionals in our world are hashtag open to work, which is kind of interesting. I mean, this is both internal talent and agency fees. I mean, I would expect agency fees would be the first thing to go in many instances, but internal talent too. It's interesting what is driving that is that because the cost savings from internal talent a lot of times aren't that significant. But is it AI? Is that something that's driving this? It's interesting to think about. The surprise in the survey is that technology share of the marketing budget is at a 10-year low. Martech took more than 29% of the marketing budget in 2018. This year it's below 24%. That seems at odds with CMOs talking about transformation and the shifts in ad spend towards digital and social channels. And that is interesting. I mean, there's so many new technologies out there that the percentage going down is quite surprising. I mean, it seems like there's a new technology all the time. And then you think about investments in AI and ad spend. I mean, the fact that this number is coming down is quite interesting. And there's a bigger challenge behind the fall. He said he spoke with Gartner's Jay Wilson last year. He said lagging returns on digital investment were the biggest drag on marketing budgets, and creating a digital value exchange should be the priority for CMOs. I think this is true. People have invested in technology, new platforms, and said, okay, what am I going to get from this? And they're not seeing the returns. And as Tom says, like engagement rates with digital channels is very low. But this is true from an advertising perspective too. Costs continue to increase and returns are getting smaller. And so it's not surprising people are trying to pull away from this. But what's the option? And this is where I think this article gets really interesting. He says, I dug deeper. Consumer trust in digital channels and satisfaction with digital services has been falling in recent years. Engagement rates are fractions of a percent. The wave of digital investment hasn't always created better outcomes for customers. So the digital channels are not performing the way they expected, and it's not creating better outcomes for the customers. He says, for pessimists, this could be an argument against digitization, what the late David Abbott described as a shit at the speed of light. For optimists, this could be a new opening. What could we achieve if we shift the investment in tech and data away from stripping down the customer experience and towards improving the customer experience? So that's the big takeaway here is this an opportunity to say we're not going to invest so much in technology, in digital, but really think about the customer experience and see what we can do to drive growth from that standpoint. Of course, this is challenging because it's not as directly measurable. And I think that's one of the things from the move towards performance marketing. It's like, okay, if I pull these levers, I can see the results and that feels good. Customer experience isn't as directly attributable. But he says there is a movement of organizations moving to this idea of customer experience. And I'm supportive of this. I think creating a compelling, meaningful brand that accounts for all the customer experiences is a really powerful tool for growth. So it'll be interesting to see if this continues to proceed, that people are moving their investment away from technology, away from, maybe performance advertising and into customer experiences, and we'll see what the output is from that. Anyway, take a look at this post. It's very insightful. All right, next up, I wanted to share this post from Adam Holmgren, who's from GetAccept. He says, "We found," in all capitals, so this is going to be big, "a new revenue driver. I've actually blown away by the results of this. A few weeks ago, we implemented an interactive demo on our site at GetAccept." And I feel like everyone's talking about interactive demos, so I'm excited to see what the results are. "The hypothesis was that buyers today need to be able to interact with the product in their own time." So that's good. I mean, I think the idea of thinking about the buyer's perspective and giving them an option to be able to engage with the product at their own pace is a great idea. And putting the buyer first when you're thinking about the decision process is really critical, and more marketers need to adopt this approach. However, they don't necessarily want to spend enough time to make a free trial successful. And I'll get into this more in a future video, but free trials are interesting because they do have the power to, they definitely have the power to increase lead capture, and they do have the power to drive growth, but you have to be very careful with free trial. You really need to be honest in your assessment of your product to see if it makes sense or not. Because a lot of products require hand-holding and they require some instruction on how to get value out of it. And if your product can't do that, then it could be actually a negative. And we've seen this be a negative in terms of growth. And so he goes on. "And yes, to increase the intent of this even more, we decided to gate it. We'll probably try using it ungated later on, but for now, this is our test." So what results have we seen? Out of everyone that enters their information to view the demo, 90% go through the entire demo, which is pretty impressive. It must be pretty engaging, which is 12 steps. And even more impressively, 30% turn into an ICP book deal. Yes, you heard that right. And so this is really interesting. Another thing about interactive demos, I definitely want to try this out. The only thing I'd say about this, would be great to see some additional data. Adam does say that he will share additional data as it becomes available, but I asked him whether it reduced the number of, typical request demos, and he said no, it has not affected that, which is something we see with free trials. You offer a free trial and your request demos come down. So this is still early, but it's interesting to see that's had this positive effect. Again, more data would be great. Looking at things like A/B testing to see how the different experiences compare. I don't know how many visitors they get, whether they can do this to incremental revenue or not. But even just seeing if they're able to capture more leads and how those leads flow through the funnel would be instructive. And so if we could see like the number of visitors and the number of leads captured from each, it would be very interesting and help build out the story more. But signs that interactive demos are effective. All right, next up, I wanted to geek out a little bit with this post from Mike Taylor. Mike's a super smart guy. I've read some of his other content before, and it's really great. And I'll share more of it in the future because it's so good. But he's now a prompt engineer. And I wanted to highlight this example because this shows, I think a lot of us who are not as technology advanced say, okay, well, AI is great because it can generate a blog post for me or summarize, this into a LinkedIn post. But he shows how powerful AI can really be if you are familiar with how to train it. It's not just about entering a prompt. He actually goes through this process of training it. And so I just wanted to highlight this process he goes through. I won't spend a ton of time on it because it can be fairly technical, but it's very interesting. And he has these 5 principles of prompting: give direction, specify format, provide examples, evaluate quality, divide labor. And so he actually provides this template. Definitely go check out this article if you're interested in, how you can get better with AI, because this is much more advanced than I think 90% of us think, and it can produce pretty amazing results. So he starts with just a naive prompt: is this spam? And he enters a spam comment, which is very clearly spam. And so it says that, perhaps this is spam. And then he does something a little more subtle. He says the message you provide doesn't appear to be spam on its own. So it has some basic capability, but as you train it, it gets so much better. And so he goes in to give direction. He says, your job is to identify common spam in the Reforge community. Reforge is a leading solution for advancing your career. And he goes on to about what it is. The comment was posted in the retention channel in the Slack community. Is this likely to be spam? So he's giving more guidance. So you start with the basic prompt and you give additional guidance. And so the AI continues to get better. He says this already does a lot better. And it's providing reasoning over whether to mark the comment or spam or not, but still doesn't have a strong enough conviction to label it correctly. Then he goes in and specifies format, define what rules to follow, what structure of the response. So he continues down this prompt, and so he gives it very specific instruction, like give us the reasoning and whether this is spam or not in this programmatic way. And this allows him to process it later so he can do a broader assessment of comments. And then he provides examples. So he continues to move down his prompts, insert a diverse set of test cases where the task was done correctly. So he's actually training this. He's showing it. This is the sort of rule set you should be using to make your decisions. So this is so far beyond what I have done with AI. I mean, I've seen some cool things, but this is so far beyond. But you can start seeing the power of this. So he starts training it with these actual examples, and then he goes and evaluates quality. So he loads a bunch of different comments in there to see how well it does. And he says the only test case this prompt doesn't get 100% correct is as follows. So he gives a very specific comment that it struggled with a little bit because it's subtle. He goes through and then divides labor. So he splits a task into multiple steps chained together for complex goals. So then he goes through and you can see he's just stacking these prompts together. And with this comment, be extremely strict. If you're unsure, mark as spam. So he stacked these prompts together and he's actually able to it successfully handles a spam comment we had trouble with the last time, but at the cost of making one of the normal user comments a spam mistakenly. Here's an example of its reasoning. And so you can see, I mean, this isn't just writing a blog post. It's loading all these spam comments into, Chat GPT, and it's actually through this prompt engineering, through this training, able to identify which ones are spam or not. And so there's, I haven't thought about it, but there's definitely other use cases out there where this would be very, very powerful. And it's not overly complex. Like his guidance here could be available to anyone to actually go through this process. And he's writing a book, which I definitely encourage all of you to check out. But I wanted to highlight this because it's such a great example of what's beyond what we're currently doing. So, I mean, there's AI tools out there which are doing some of this, natively within the tool and not, masking all the technology. But here it just shows like there's a go between or an in between level between just saying, hey, write this blog post for me and these, more advanced tools. Like there's opportunities to really use AI in a powerful way if you train it correctly. And so Mike, provides that guidance, and I'm sure his book will provide even more guidance. 3 things today when it comes to driving growth. Think about what Tom Morton shared, and is there an opportunity to take our digital budgets, our technology budgets in marketing and focus more on customer experience? Is that a way to drive meaningful growth? Then Adam Holmgren has had success at GetAccept with interactive demos. Maybe it's worth trying that out for your company. We'll wait to see more data from Adam, but a lot of indicators show interactive demos are beneficial. And then finally, Mike Taylor showed us how to use prompt engineering and training AI to really get meaningful results. Is there opportunities for you to do something similar to help drive growth